Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Good morning. Hello, thank you very much, Jim. It's like, anybody there? No, there's some people that I know, some people that I don't know. It's just lovely to see you all. Got about 60 people booked on, so but some people aren't attending in real time. They're going to receive a recording, I think. But we might give it a couple of seconds. But while we're waiting for people to join, I'd love to know a little bit about you. So I'd love to know if you could pop in the chat where you're based, because I think if Kim Carlo is here, she's in Australia, I'm sure. I'm thinking.
No.
Oh, well, you're not.
Devon?
Devon. Oh, you're a different Kim Carlo. I know a Kim Carlo that's based in Adelaide. Never mind. So Devon is fine, Kim. Devon is fine. So if you want to pop in the chat where you're based and what you do, so what you make, so I can get an idea of what it is that you make as well, just to get some, just to get to know you a little bit better, because obviously Zoom's not quite as personal as in person. Lovely. So also lots of ceramics, lovely jewelry. So Gloucester. Ceramics, maritime theme, that'd be Anne Barrell then, I think, probably. Hello, Anne. Hiya. We've not met, but here we go. Hello. So there's all sorts of people from all parts of the world. That's lovely. And also just to get a gauge as well of your experience of craft fairs. If you've never done a craft fair before, put a 1 in the chat. You've never done one. So if you've quite a few never done one, that's interesting. Well, let's guess that's why you're here. If you've done one, what was the question? I think it was, I had 3 questions. But if you've done a craft fair of any kind, put number 2 in. So it doesn't matter what size it is, if it's just tabletop, all sorts. There's lots of fantastic craft fairs out there. But or if you've done craft festival, or a show of that kind, like that sort of size, put a 3 in the chat facility, so I can gauge to see how many. So there's a few of you who've done big shows as well. Okay, that's really interesting. That's interesting to know. So just to get gauged, yeah. No, it doesn't really matter. Just to gauge whether you've actually sold to the public, been any. So if any, just maybe put a 4 in the chat box if you've ever worked in retail of any kind, ever worked in retail of any kind, just so I can, lots of, usually I started out with clutching my degree in ceramics in hand, and the first job I got was working in a shop, which was fine. It gave me a lot of experience in how to sell, and it's a great grounding in becoming, when you're a maker, if you want to making a living from it, you have to sell it, and there are lots of different ways to sell your work. But we're going to talk today about craft fairs. Right, there's people still joining, but what I'll do is I'll make a start now, and then I'll just keep checking as people arrive for today. So if people have arrived a little bit late, my name is Sarah James. I'm from Craft Festival. I'm from West Wales originally. I'm based in Devon. And I run craft fairs and Find a Maker. And I'm just going to give you I'm going to bring up a screen share now with hopefully my presentation. Can you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thumbs up. So if everyone got what I'll do is because of the way Zoom, I am going to try and get a bit of conversation going. It's a little more difficult in these situations with Zoom to try and get sort of back and forth, as you may have done Zooms before. So if that doesn't sort of work out and we can't make it work, what we'll do, we'll have a chat at the end. Okay, but if you have any questions, do pop them in the chat, and I probably will do them, Saturday. Well, what's his grand? There's nothing wrong with Woolies, whoever put that in, so that's great to know. Just asking if people had any retail experience if you asked arrived a little bit late. But we'll put questions in the chat as we go along. I may have to wait till the end before I answer them, but if you have, or you can wait and ask me questions, and at the end we can actually put your hand up and you can ask me questions in person if you want. So if you could pop yourself on mute now, just in case any background noise starts to come in. I know that I may have my dogs might bark, so I'm going to apologize for that in advance, but hopefully they won't. Okay, so I'll just give you a little bit of background about myself, just so that you understand where I'm coming from. That wasn't moving. Right, let's move now. So my name is Sarah James. As I said, I'm born in West Wales originally. I have got a background in making. My degree is in ceramics, and I did that. I graduated in 1993 from Glasgow School of Art. And I've done a lot of different things over my career. I did have my own pottery business for a few years, or set up by the Prince's Trust. But I moved across really to sort of the dark side of being an arts administrator sort of quite early on in my career. And I worked for the Crafts Council originally in the information section. That's always good, talking about craft all the time. I became a craft development officer. I set up my own gallery at one point in Bristol called Made. I've been the director of the Craft Festival in Bovey Tracy for nearly 20 years now. I had a very brief stint as the co-director of Make Southwest, which is now was the Devon Craftsman, but if I say the Devon Craftsman, I have to give the new director £1 every time, so I mustn't say that ever again. It's Make Southwest. We had a rebrand. I still call it we. I haven't worked there for years, but we're very, very close partners in the events that we do. I also co-founded Maberhand Online, which is an online selling platform, and founded more events and a podcast and Find a Maker. I suppose I'm not having a major brag here, but it does sound like I am. But what I'm trying to say is that my degree in ceramics and in craft led me in all sorts of different directions. And I didn't for 1 minute think I would be an event organizer, but it took me lots of different ways. And the Craft Festival set up, the Craft Festival that I'm talking, that is in Bovey Tracy at the moment, and in June every year, and we do other shows, but we started in Bovey, and it's a large village really. It's not a big place, so it's quite an unlikely place to have such a massive craft fair. But we were set up with European funding back in 2003 when we got the funding, and our first event was in 2004, and it's grown to be one of the biggest and best craft events in the country. And I think because we're a non-profit making company, we have survived in various ways, and it's great that we'll be celebrating our 20th year next year. I can't believe it, to be honest. And what makes us different is about the quality of the makers. We have a very specific selection process, and I'm going to talk you through that in a short while. And it applies to all the big shows that are around the country. We are very similar to a number of shows, and I will mention some really good shows that I think are brilliant, sort of kind of at the end of the talk. I think venues are really important. Good venues are important. It's nice to have a beautiful venue. We have a beautiful park where we set up marquees in Bovey Tracy, and in Cheltenham, it's a really lovely sort of Regency sort of town hall. And also we add a lot of content. And the reason why I add a lot of content is I think it really helps to explain the value of the work. So we have lots of workshops, demonstrations, talks, lots of stuff for children. And we have lots of fun stuff like food and music and various things. So there are various opportunities that we offer for business and for new business. And new business we consider to be in the first 2 years of starting up. So in Bovey Tracy, we have quite a large startup section. And that if you'd applied this year, because we've done the application this year, you would needed to have started since January 2021. So it's 2 years before the show starts, so you can apply. So if you're in your early stages of career, you're eligible to apply, and it means that you have a stand at the show, and essentially it's just almost half price. It's not quite half price, but it's very close to half price. And it's a great opportunity. A lot of makers start out in startup and then move forward into the main areas of the show. We think it's really important that we do a lot of teaching at the shows as well. And we do that in Cheltenham. We have workshops and demonstrations, passing those skills forward to try and encourage children as well. We have a massive children's craft tent. Always felt it was very important to include young children in the process of running events when it wasn't done at the time, particularly. I had very young children at the time. My children were 3 and sort of 6 months old, really. And I was interested in craft, and I assumed that there were lots of people like me who would want to be able to go to a beautiful craft event that was really, really high quality, but wanted it, but still had children and could bring them. I wasn't going to be terrified of being told off, I think, really. So they are separate. We don't have the children sent in the main bits, but it's all good. But ultimately, it's about the makers, really. It's about the quality of the work. And that's the sort of thing I'm going to be talking to you about now, really, is about how important it is for events to not just show how you can sell your work, but how you present yourself personally, how you present your work on the stand, and obviously how you get into the shows in the first place, which can be obviously the first point. So I wondered whether we could use the chat facilities. We'll try this. I don't know how we'll work on Zoom. We'll see how we get on. And we'll have a little think. Is it what do you think the benefits are? Why should you sell directly to the public? Have you got any particular thoughts of why that might be a good idea? Because there are pros and cons to selling directly. Like in any situation in the world, there's always drawbacks. But if you can think of pop anything into the chat that you might think would be a good reason to do selling directly to the public. Because there's a lot of effort involved, to do this sort of thing. So if you could think of anything in the chat, you could pop it in there, and then I'll have a little look to see. Yeah, these are sort of things that I would. They would say, meet the buyer, better insight the customers want, lower fees. Yeah, there's conversations with people. People invest in the person, people can experience the materials directly, ask questions. Yeah, it's fantastic to meet the buyers. It's fantastic to meet the people as well, your fellow standholders. That can be something, public meeting you in person and connecting. Yeah, to get commissions. Yeah. Part of craft is to find out about the product. Yeah, it's all about the story, isn't it, really, when you're meeting people directly as well, and when you're out there. And I think it can really develop lots of different good ways to develop your business by meeting the public. And I think one of the main things, I've got a big list here of things, but there is the main things are moving forward. Hang on, there it is. Because it's, there are good things about it. You meet your customers. I mean, when you have work in galleries, and galleries should never be discounted, they should really be part of your plan to sell your work. It's all part of the structure of the infrastructure of retail in the UK. Is, sell it yourself, sell it through galleries, sell it to shops, sell it online. There's lots of different avenues, but when you're selling directly to the public, meeting your customer is so important. Getting that direct feedback, that you're looking for, to see, just to get those conversations going, and meeting your fellow makers. You'll find that if you do shows, and if some of you have done big shows, you'll know that this is true. That the people that you meet at the shows, they become firm friends, for life, because you're usually thrown into quite, it's quite challenging situations. It can be quite very busy and exhausting, and you do rely on people to help you, like whether to watch your stand while you nip to the loo or grab a sandwich, things like that. You do build up a great camaraderie, and you do get to meet gallery owners and people within the industry, because they do come to some of the bigger shows. They tend to do come along, and because they're looking to source for their retail outlets as well. And being part of a big show can raise your profile. So make sure you always put down on your website which big shows that you've taken part in, because it does tell a little bit more of your story to show that you've been selected to be in part of the bigger shows, because it does mean something. All the other things that are more passive in terms of what it does for yourself as a personal development. It can develop your selling skills, your public speaking skills, project management skills, because I mean, if anyone's done Bovie, they know that it's a big event to get yourself organized for. And the bigger events, you do have to make sure that you plan things in advance. And we'll go into things like that in a bit, about what you might need to think about. And about controlling your prices as well is quite important, because it's not a market. People talk about market. So I don't like it sounded like a market. It's not a market in the sense that people can start haggling with you for your prices. And I'm sure if you've done fairs already, you may have experienced this already. It is unfortunately quite a common occurrence where people will try and attempt to bring your prices down. like things like, do you want, if I gave you cash and all this sort of nonsense. This is not the type of scenario I want to be encouraging you to do at all, actively discouraging you to do it. Because you want to make sure that, say, for example, if a gallery owner that you're working with comes to a show and sees your prices to be particularly lower than at the gallery, that's going to really cause a problem with your relationship with the gallery. And also, you really should be charging the same amount as that gallery, because that's your retail price. So it's really important that you have price parity across all of the ways. It can be a little challenging, but for all the different ways that you sell, that you are priced at the same amount. It's really important. And also, being in a sort of public situation with other makers does encourage collaboration as well. And I think that's really exciting. But I think it's really important that you do some research as well. So if you are thinking of doing a show beyond maybe the small affairs that you've taken part in already, or not done at all, whichever one you want to go to, go to it first in advance if you can, and talk, without talking to the exact standholders when they're trying to sell things, but when they've got a quiet moment, just say, oh, what's this show like? What do you think about it? Because I can say all sorts of things about my shows. I'm obviously going to be hugely complimentary about them, but when I go around to events and talk about craft festival, I usually say, oh, well, don't take my word for it. Go and ask blah blah XYZ, and they'll tell you what the show is like. But what I would suggest to do is that whichever show that you want to get involved with, you sign up to their newsletters, so they will remind you. Because I've had emails this week asking about, have you got a stand at Cheltenham, which is on weekend after next. I mean, that is, it can be a little irritating from my point of view, but at the same time, it's like, we have sold out the show in Cheltenham like September. We've sold out the show in June. We work, most of the big events work, like we are at the moment, our call for entries is actually for our show in November, and it's February, well, it's March now, happy St. David's Day. But it's like we do work massively in advance. So pictures, good images are your absolutely most important thing, obviously, apart from the work itself. But photographing it well. And throughout this presentation, there are examples of good photography, and I will actually do a whole section on what the selection panel looks for, and examples of what a good selection of images looks like. You need to also work out your budget. We're going to look at the budget in a second as well, and think about things like, can you produce enough stock? Because I don't want to put you off. This whole thing's not designed to make you think you don't want to do big shows, but you've got to think about, do you have enough stock to supply your shops? Do you have enough stock to supply your website? Do you have enough stock to keep back? Because obviously you've got to make work and not sell it, because you're going to sell it at a craft fair. So you've got to put all those things in your mind about which stock is going where. This may be something that you're doing already, but you've got to start thinking in that like that in a different way. So if you was, again, I wouldn't mind if you could pop things in the chat about what do you think the budget should include. So imagine if you were putting together all the costs on the budget, costs really more than anything, of taking part in a craft fair. What do you think are the many and various things you should be thinking about that will be part of the overheads of the show that you're going to be taking part in? Can you pop things in the chat while we're having to think about that? Because there's so many different things. We've got the travel, accommodation, where to stay. Not have to post breakables, that's a benefit. That is a very good one. I think not packing things, that's a very good question. You should have seen that. Travel, food, the store, petrol, display, material, stand, promotion, time away from making. That's very important. Display, props, card machine costs, price event itself, exactly. Coffee, there's lots of coffee being drunk, annual leave being used up, wrapping boxes, packaging. Yeah, there's a lot of things to think about. And there's let me see if there's another one there. Business cards. There's a few there. I think I've got my little list. Let's have a look. There's an image. Cattery, yeah, yes. Classic. Yeah, if you need to, animal care. childcare, you know, well, it's all sorts of things. So when you start with the application fee, it might be ours is £15. So there's £15 on the thing. Your photography costs, you might want to take some new pictures, whether it's for the application or for your promotion of your for the duration of the year of the show. Stand costs. Lots of people mention transport, accommodation. Nobody mentioned insurance. You've got to include insurance. You're making costs, the time we take to making the time away from the studio. Display. A lot of people mention display, packaging, promotional material, eating. Lots of people mention that, parking. So can add up, to be fair. If there's no parking charges, everything is included. But when we do the show in Cheltenham, the setting up, unloading period, we take care of. We pay for parking suspensions. But once the show's once that 45-minute slot for your unloading is over, you've got to start paying for parking. Obviously people mentioned display. And I think it's really important, you know, the first one will be most expensive. There's some things you won't be doing every single time. Obviously, your packaging, your stand display itself will probably not change huge amounts every time. But lots of these things are recurring costs. So again, I'm not trying to put you off. I'm just trying to put you in the picture. But the thing with your stand display, I always would recommend that you do it in advance and lay it all out, set it up in advance. When I worked at Next once upon a time. That was my first job outside of university. I worked at Next Retail, and they, you know, in these days it would be all done on computer, but at the time a book would be sent around with literally pages. You would turn the pages, and that's how the shops were laid out. They were literally just followed the guidelines. And I would really set up. You don't have to stick fast and hard to what you've done. You know, you can change your mind on the day, but I would have the framework there, because some shows will have a very specific time slots and not huge amounts of time to set up, like when it's a city centre setup, which a lot of them are. Bobby Tracy, you have a long time. You can take all day if you wish, but a lot don't. And even when you do have a long time, it's quite a frantic sort of environment. So you do need to think, and that time just goes in a flash, and everyone's a bit worried, nervous. So if you've got, you know, if you kind of know what it's basically going to look like, I would really strongly recommend it. And you won't have to keep doing that, obviously, but when you're starting out, I would really, you know, practice it. And also when you go to other shows, to look for, you know, whether it's for you or not, look at other people's stands. You know, how are they doing it? It's always a good experience to go around and just look at how, you know, maybe that's not how you don't want to do it. You know, it's really always good to go and look to see and get some ideas from other shows. So images, now they're so important. I cannot stress it any stronger. It's so important that you have good pictures. Now I'm going to show you a selection now of what the selection panel sees at our shows. And it's very similar for the larger shows like the Great Northern in Manchester and Made London. They will be doing they do a very similar process. We ask for 6 images in 2 different sizes. So one is 300 DPI, one is 72. So the 72 DPI, which looks really tiny, but actually is perfectly fine for the selection process. We download all of those and we save the 300 DPIs for those who are selected. So if you're selected, because we need a higher resolution image for any promotional things that we might do, like you might get onto the front of the catalogue. Graham Hawes, for example, his images are always absolutely stunning, and he is on the front of the catalogue for this year's Bobby Tracy as a result of having good pictures, and he'll be on every advert, every flyer, everything, and people will go straight to his stand because of that. So to be able to, so if a show chooses your image for their promotional material, it's a really, really good you know, advert for you. So see, really strong in focus, regardless of whether you like the work or not. There's nothing to do with the work. I'm not really going to talk about the work itself, because it's about how it's been photographed I'm interested in this case. Obviously work is clearly important, but you know what I'm trying to say. Really in focus, nice and bright, all taken landscape, all portrait, don't mix them up. it's really, when you think we've got hundreds of images to look through in a day, and if you can give the selection panel, I don't choose, just to be clear, I'm just there to help the selection panel on the day. They look at it all, they choose who's on, and they choose who's on the waiting list as well. So this is a nice sort of quite gently styled. It's, you know, it's not really styled in a sense, but it's got a little bit more of a composition rather than straight images like Graham's there, which are just clear images of his work. But I have used this person's work for the cover of the catalogue as well. So I used the top left image. That spherical piece was the centerpiece of the Craft Festival about 2 years ago, I think it was. It's a bit of a blur because of COVID, but I'm going to say a couple of years ago. I think the one when we came back in a weird time of year that we don't normally do. So these are nicely photographs, gives you have a really clear sense of what this person's work is about. And she's, I think by the looks of it, probably used a professional photographer. May not have done, that might be just a corner of the studio. Around it might be absolute chaos, but she set up a corner in her studio where it's all got the same background, so you can pop the work on there and regularly take photos. If you can set up something like that in your studio, so you're taking regular pictures in a very similar way, you know, whichever you do in a collection, so they all look really together at the same time. Now, furniture is a bit different in a sense that a lot of the time makers are working to a brief, to a customer's brief. It's quite different to a lot of other crafts. And so their work can be a little bit different in style, because we always want to try and see like a coherent collection. But still, you can show a really good collection of work, all photographed in quite a similar way. And then there's a little bit of detailing, but you don't need to show a lot of detail. Just these are really good images of what you do. Now, again, these are really, you know, bold, but they show the work clearly. You know, it's all in focus, and it's all taken at the same time. Or if they're not, they're all taken in the same style, so it looks like they're taken all at the same time. And I think it's important that the selectors think that this is a new collection, that you've sent in work that's recent. You know, you don't grab a whole random list, because I've seen lots of, and it's even with experienced makers, a random selection of work from different years, and it isn't helpful. You know, we want to be able to see that the work is new and current. And you've put some thought behind it. This is a Potter, and these would be considered whereas that would be like considered a cutout. So you could easily grab those, cut it out, and put it on a shopping page. So a lot of the, you know, these images that you're going to be taking, whichever you do, whether it's for a craft fair, or for applications, or for sending to a gallery, or for going for press, you know, you need to think about the different kind of photography. So these ones would be more suited to a shopping page, whereas this would be considered a styled shot, but it's very gently styled. So there's no ambiguity about what we're looking at in the image. It is clearly the pots we're selling, not the house behind it. But these are lovely, lovely pictures. I've used these a lot in our promotional work, and they are taken by, I think those are taken by a photographer called Yeshen, who's based in London. And you can send your work to Yeshen and he will take the photographs for you. And he does shoots in different venues as well, in different parts of the country, like beautiful country. He hires beautiful venues and he sends work, and he does like a load of shoot, you know, for individual people, and takes photographs in lovely settings. So that's what you think about. You might want, I don't know him, I'm not commission based or anything. I know that this person uses him. So again, these are taken quite simply. There's no razzmatazz here really, as a simple thing to hang it from, and it's natural light coming in from the side by the looks of it. And those are perfectly acceptable pictures, just nice and clear, you know, and they just show off the work, and it's quite nice with a little bit of tone on it, so you can see the work clearly. But these are completely different. So these are very styled, but there's no ambiguity again. And he's definitely not selling the books or the typewriter. He's just creating a mood, really, is what I'd call it. And that's the kind of work this chap does. He does a lot of work with vintage items and his particular style of work. So he's tried to create that mood to convey his brand within his pictures, which he does pretty well, I think. And these are just really lovely, you know, this is a very similar tonal quality. shows the work off really well. You can see the rims of the finish, and shows that there's a breadth as well within the practice as well. It's not just one piece taken at different angles. You know, we want to be able to be confident that there's a lot, you've got plenty of work, you've got a range of work to show, because that's quite important. And if you sell work that's on the body, if you're selling clothing or accessories, to make sure that you have to. It's really important to understand that professional models are really, they are what they are. They basically enhance. They don't detract from the product. I think you can fall into trap of having good-looking friends who are really, you know, but they do need to be fully styled, hair, makeup, the whole 9 yards. This model is absolutely amazing, but they're absolutely stunning, but really just elevates the work. You know, that you're not. It's not really about the model. It's about the textiles, and that's what you've got to try. And also to notice that the backgrounds are the same color. It's been photographed at the same time, and she sent in all the pictures, portrait, so it all looks brilliant. You know, when it comes up, because this is exactly what they see. They're not shown 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're shown like this in one go. Again, some lovely pictures of jewelry, really beautifully photographed. This person is an enameler, and it's photographed in a way that really does show the shine and the finish and the quality really well. A completely different set. A lot of these are details. It is much more styled, but it gives that almost a bit of a mood, you know. So we're not looking for one particular style as such. We just want to make sure that it really represents you as a maker, and they're all good in focus pictures that show the work off really well. But it's really about this picture is more about collection. You can, you know, it's obvious that this is one body of work, and it's been taken at the same time in one shoot. And don't be tempted to send in lots of different ranges, even if that doesn't mean you can't sell them on the day. The selection panel want to be able to just be confident that you've got good making skills, you've good the style that we like. But it's more that, you know, just wanted to look. It's easy to translate on the day. You know, we can see it's, oh, that will look good work. You can have 2 or 3 different ranges, especially, well, a lot of makers have different ranges, but for selection, we just want to see one. Okay. So this is an example of really of what it can look like if you do send in lots of different pictures of different things that you do. It just isn't helpful, you know, and it doesn't really set off very well what you might make. And there might be some aspects, like I've seen these ceramic birds in the flesh. I think I may even bought one. After seeing this, thinking, gosh, is that the same person? Didn't really help themselves by the way that they presented themselves at the selection panel. So there's no need to put in any pictures of yourself at all. We just want to see pictures. I know it's interesting to have a picture of you throwing on the wheel. It looks lovely, but it isn't going to add to the selection process. We will want a picture of you because often we use images of the makers making in our promotional activities, but not then. So this, you know, this is quite just difficult to get the gauge on. It's too ambiguous about what this person's work is about. I mean, I know there's a bowl and there's a spoon, and I'm not sure. At the bottom right, they could be earrings, or they could be bowls. I'm not sure. It was just too difficult to tell, and whether they just had a bit of a small range. There were spoons and bowls, so it's difficult because there's not a lot wrong with it really. But there's just when you've got hundreds of people wanting to do the show, you just kind of go, I'm really sorry that we don't know what that's about, and you're not there to be able to talk about it. So probably got to think. And even though we do ask for words and applications, there is a piece of work that we want a bit of information. But we will only really refer to that to sort of if it's very difficult to read what you make. You know what I mean? It's almost like we have that always with us to look through, and always curious to see where people are based and things like that. But that's never based. We don't really make our decisions based on that. But we might look to see where you trained, or you can be self-taught though. You don't have to have gone to university. You can have gone to evening classes and started that way, or gone on apprenticeships, or self-taught, or whatever, YouTube videos, whichever way you've done it. Because lots have changed in recent years, the way people are learning. but you know, you want to make sure people maybe put sizes in so we can get some context. It's very difficult. There's no context. It's a little bit of context on some of them, but just make it easy for the selection panel. And this one was because it was this was one person's work, but they look like they're two completely different people's work. And the work, it would be something that the work on the bottom is not necessarily what we'd want to select, but the top work is great. But because it was put in together, we were just concerned that they were planning on bringing that work and weren't sure what it was all about, because the work above is great. So you just think that's what it looks like. You can think, why would they do that? Don't do that. Send in the picture of work of one collection so we can go, right, that's what that's about. Okay, so I'm just seeing there's some questions in the chat there. I'm just going to have a little look. Oh, there we go. Yeshen's about to launch a subscription-based guide to taking your own pictures. And Steve Simmons, you've used Yeshen, he is good. Yeah, no, he is excellent. And I know many people, and people use it also. There's another one called Article Studio as well. They're based in Stroud. I'm only recommending them because I have actually seen their photos. Good. But there's look, I mean, I think it is worth the money, you know, to get your photos done professionally if you can, or if you feel very, very confident. But you know, they do take the guide that I've given you there in terms of like the quality of the styling and the quality of the finish that we're after in pictures, and that will help you. Okay, selling. You know, selling is a vital part. It's the most important part now in terms of selling directly to the public, is that you now are a salesperson. And that's not a very comfortable thing for a lot of people, but it is absolutely vital that this is something that you can add, but it's something that you can develop and learn. I've developed ability to be able to do public speaking and talking and do presentations, go on Instagram Live, all these things. These are not something I was would have been very comfortable doing a few years ago. So it's something that I've learned, you can learn over time. But if this is something that some people, this is kind of not something to worry about, they don't really think about it. It's selling is not a problem. But when I talk about selling, I think most people don't want the hard sell. You know, we're not trying to push things on people. It never works. So I just, while we're going through this, I'm going to go through a few. Helen McCormack's got a hand up. If you got a question, Ellen, do you want to pop it in the chat? That would be great. We're going to answer questions later on. I'll just check to see what that is. Simon Bruntnell. Oh, that's, yes, I saw your pictures, Ebby, because you're in Devon Life at the moment, aren't you? Well done for that. So, I mean, what I wanted, while I'm talking through this section, so what we're going to do in this section is go through things about what can be helpful to help you sell your work, and also how important that your stand is. Your stand is basically like your person, your second salesperson. How you present your work is so important. And think about all those aspects. So while I'm going through this, and whether you want to pop things in the chat, because when we do the show, these talks in real life, as it were, I ask the participants to think about what some good experiences for retailing and not so good experiences of retailing. And I just wondered whether you want to think about some of the things that you think that are an important part of when you go into a shop situation. So imagine, you know, what in your mind, what would be a good retail experience? Because really what you're becoming now, I don't have to explain that to you really, but you're becoming a shopkeeper. But you're becoming a shopkeeper in probably the most beautiful department store in the world, because everyone has been selected for quality. So you're looking, and every little booth essentially is a shop. So every single shop is good. So you've got to think about what it is that you need to do to make sure that that is a great experience for the customer and for you as well. You know, what sort of things do you want to do, and what things do you want to avoid doing? And we can go through some of those things. We've got some of these. I hate people jumping on me. Yeah, that is one of the single most things. Yeah. Being ignored. Yeah, absolutely. It's really, really important that we acknowledge. I mean, the first thing we do, we smile, make contact, make eye contact, smile and say hello. You don't really need to go further than that, you know, but you do have to be acknowledged. You don't want to be stared at. You know, it is difficult, as they imagine in shows, but you've just got to be kind of light about it. So that first sort of point of contact, and everyone does shop in different ways as well. You have to think when you do shows the size of Bobby Tracy, for example, or a big craft fair, you know, there's so many stands that a lot of people will look around the whole show first before they start buying. I mean, but there's some people, you know, it depends on people's budgets, I guess. A lot of people have a very, you know, will have a idea in their mind about how much money they're thinking of spending. Some might not, but you know, but most people will look through. So it can be a bit of a long game. You know, you might find that the sales start a little bit later in the day, depending on when the people have been around a lot. And also people personally shop in different ways. Like I like to chat. Sometimes I don't like, I immediately get drawn to something and I don't need to chat, but I always like to chat to someone. Some people will not say anything to you at all and still come back later or will buy, you know, and some people will chat and chat and chat and chat and chat and buy nothing. So you really is a difficult gauge to have. And I say, it's all, is it best to have visual pricing? Yes, absolutely. I think your pricing should be, like if you could look on the slide that I've shown here, there's below each little pot, there's a small little, probably a sticker of some sort. So you can immediately see without touching it or picking up, though I think handing things to people, this is a very powerful selling technique, is to be able to hand someone, those are lovely sort of handheld pieces of ceramics, so they're very easily handed over to the person, to the customer. But if you can see a price clearly, I mean, think of yourself, if you were going into, say, John Lewis or any other big retailer and you couldn't see the price, you're not going to go and find someone. And it's also quite embarrassing to have to go, how much is it, please? Because you want to be able to know. And also don't think it's good enough to put a price list on the wall with the list of everything, because a lot of that those titles and names don't mean a lot to anyone else but you. And it's very difficult for you to quickly decipher which is the small spherical, you know, moon vase or whatever. You know, you might know exactly what that is without thinking, well, your customer would not. So really make sure that it's all clearly priced on you know, on your stand. And also look at where this person is standing. They are, you know, upright. They're at this middle section. This is the most important section on your stand, is sort of almost waist to eye line height. That is the most you know, valuable part. That's why supermarkets, that's why companies pay more in the supermarkets to have their products in this section of the supermarket. That's a sort of premium section that people pay more to have. So think about that. About people jumping on me. Is it jumping on you? Yeah, there's all these sort of things. Bad experience. I just look at that. Don't. Yeah, visible pricing, definitely. But you know, your story is so interesting to people. That's why people come to craft fairs. Is we all said at the beginning about why do you do it? It's about meeting the people. You know, it's about talking about your work. It's making sure, you know, everyone's got a story about what they make, even if it's just about the material itself. It could be a particular narrative about landscape, you know, and a personal story of yours. You know, there should be an element that you are able to talk about it, to really draw in the customer into why they should be investing their money in you. And that's a really interesting one. You know, you don't be pump information, because there's always that little element where you can get suddenly in a conversation and someone's asking you about where your suppliers are, where to get your clay and all. You know, you've got to draw lines, but you know, be friendly, never be rude, you know, don't ever feel threatened by all these questions. Just kind of have the conversation that you're prepared to have. But it's really, that's such a, you know, really important part of the sales. When you talk about sales techniques, you know, it's really is about talking confidently about your work, being friendly and open, and, you know, making sure people are comfortable to try things on, but leave people alone if they don't want to be talked to. As someone said, I don't like being stared at or followed around. You know, don't do this, don't do the same yourself. You know, I'm not suggesting that you would, because you've obviously noticed it's something annoying in others, but just as I say, you, and also your stand is so important, the way you lay it out. Now, this guy, Vinegar Brown Paper, you know, he puts everything in the kitchen sink on his stand. And some people have, like, I'll show a stand in a minute with it, has about 4 things on their stand. And they're equally valid. You know, it just depends on what you're trying to get across as a brand. His brand is very much about the sort of Victorian apothecary, and everything's all like a shop, like an old, you know, hardware stores slash pharmacy, and all different sorts of things. And his is all about storytelling. So it's very much, you know, he layers it on, you know, to make it, you know, that's his thing. You know, it doesn't have to be your thing. But it's always good as well to consider your range of prices. You know, everything, you know, printmakers, you know, I know some printmakers, they sell tons of cards. I mean, to the point where they make thousands of pounds selling card versions of their prints. You know, those are the most obvious version because they're most translatable into it. But I'm not suggesting you'll start making greetings cards unless it's something you want to do, obviously. But if you're a furniture maker, you might want to make sure that you've got some smaller items like chopping boards, serving platters and spoons, things like that, so that you have got a range. Because especially if there's any furniture makers in the group here today, I think there was someone, you know, furniture is a long game. You know, you're mostly taking contact details, hopefully making an appointment to go and visit someone's home, because often that's a commission, which has to be done in it's a real, like, to and fro partnership conversation with your customer, and so you want to make, you know, you might not make any sales on the day. You know, it's really about, well, I've got 6 appointments, those should turn into 6 commissions, which might keep me going for a long time, you know, a year, but or whatever. But you might want to consider those different price ranges, because we encourage all sorts of people to come to our shows. We don't discourage, you know, we want as many different kinds of people, whether they're chief executive of a company, or we have nursery nurses and people within, you know, all walks of life. I think it's really important that we are open and accessible to as many people as possible. So don't underestimate or you know, or make assumptions on people. Because we did a survey actually not that long ago, and the biggest group of people that come to our shows is teachers and nurses. So it's kind of people who are, you know, not necessarily particularly wealthy as such, but they're massively passionate about it and love the subject, and will love coming to buy from you. As I say, your stand can be very, very simple. It's another maker here, Anthony Theakson, he makes bronze sculptures. And as opposed to the maker who had lots and lots and lots of work, and the person before, lots and lots of work covering the stand. This Anthony opts for more of a gallery approach, and I think has about maybe 6 pieces, and his stand was huge. I mean, it was about 4 or 5 meters long, which is one of our biggest stands, and kept it very simple because the work is high value. It's probably starting at there's a mixture of ceramics and bronzes, so they're quite high value work. So he's giving it that sort of extra space, you know, to elevate that the work at the time, you know, work, and give it space it needs. Again, if you're working with jewelry or anything that goes on the body, accessories, fashion, any clothing, you must make sure that you've got mirrors on your stand, and or a changing area, enough space to be able to actually change and put the clothes on and sort of step back and look in the mirror and everything. So give that a little bit of pizzazz on your stand, and that's all part of making people feel really welcome. Now, one of the most important things you mustn't forget to do when you're at the shows is try and get people's details that you've been chatting to, whether they've bought or have shown quite a lot of interest. Because imagine if you think, oh, I don't really feel like doing it. I don't want to do that. You think, well, you've paid to be at this show. It's one of the, it's something that's quite an investment. And at the end of the show, even if you sold to them, and I ask you, so who were they then? And you go, oh, well, I don't know. You know, you think, well, that's really silly, isn't it? Really, you want to make sure. And a lot of people, you know, I don't want to patronize you at all. So I apologize if you do this already. but make sure that you just gently ask people, as well, not say, would you like to go on my mailing list? But to say, would you like me to inform you where I'm going to be next? You know, and where my next exhibition is. And people do, they literally want to follow you. And if they want to give you your mailing, your details, they really do want to hear from you. You know, I hear so often makers saying, I ask, so how many of you do social media, you know, regularly? And the hand goes straight up. Yeah, do that, like maybe daily, you know, certainly weekly, you know, often. I said, well, how often do you email your mailing list of people who've actually bought from you or really like your work, like, you know, for sure? And it's like hardly anybody puts their hand up. And you've got to think to yourself, that's the reality of that. Doesn't make sense, does it? You know, you think you've just got to make sure that you do actually communicate with the people that actually have shown interest in your work. Social media is fantastic, don't get me wrong, I love it. But it's a random selection of people. You know, you've got to think, who are they? And it doesn't matter how many people you've got on your mail list, 5, 100,000, whatever. Make sure you tell them where you're going to be, when you're going to do shows, where you're going to be. And the way to build it up, literally, if you're thinking, how do I build a mailing list? This is a really good place to start. Obviously, through your website is another one. We're not talking about that today, particularly, but making sure that you have got that little that's your golden nugget, because Instagram does not belong to you and you could lose it tomorrow. You know, so I always think it's so important. So this is quite a nice stand, simple stand, all the eye line when Hannah stands up, because it's quite important not to sit down. It can be really difficult, depending if you need to sit down. Obviously, if you have any physical issues, then sitting is essential. But if you don't, it's much better if you can to be stood up, to look lively, and because it's all about your body language. I mean, it's so important. You tell so much of a story about yourself without saying anything, just by how your position, how you stand, and looking available. And it's so important. If you do, I mean, most people have a chair on this side, but try and ideally get like ones that are fold away, and maybe more of a sort of high stool one where you can sort of perch on a bit. Because also what you find is if you sit down a lot, you do start to, as fatigue sets in, you do start to crumple a bit physically, and you do start to look and feel kind of not so great. So I would try and take regular breaks then, if you can, if you need to go off and have, you know, get a coffee and have a break. But I would try and stay stood up. But talking of drink coffees and teas and things, and drinking and eating, you mustn't drink and eat visibly on your stand. You need to be high. I would just say, you think, how do you manage that? I was thinking, well, if you're working in Harvey Nichols, and as a customer came up to you at the till or what have you, and you were eating a sandwich and coffee, you know, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? You wouldn't dream of accepting that if you're in a smart shop. So it's no different for yourselves, really. You should behave as if you are, you know, a very smart retailer, and keep the stand as well, making sure the stand is always looking tidy. Review it as you go along as well. You know, have a look to see, is it which is working? Are there areas of the stand that are a bit more lively than others for some reason? You have these things called hotspots in your stands where there's better spaces for selling that emerge as you see the day go along, and you think, oh god, everything's selling from that point. So, you know, rotate things, move things around. You don't have to have everything static in your stand over the, you know, you might be there for 2 or 3 days. You can move things around. But also things like, you know, some jewelry requires to be below under glass for insurance purposes. But I would always encourage not to be under in cabinets if you can. You know, it's good to hand things out, be there, always be present, you know, to hand things and let people try things on. But if you can't, and it's, you know, for example, this work is gold, diamonds, you know, massively high value work. You know, they want to be behind glass. So to get over that sort of like barrier, which that glass is, this maker has got lots of lovely big pictures of her work behind her, so you still get that sense of what the work is like, and it is nicely displayed in the glass. In nice space, give plenty of space for your work. This maker makes lovely garments, so there's space on her stand for trying on work. And she's wearing her work. Again, if you make jewelry, you wear it. If you make does, you wear it. If you're, if it's something that goes on the body, you put it on your body ideally, so that you are a walking display for your stuff. And if you're having, if you've got if you're a potter, you make yourself a cup of coffee, it's in one of your cups. You don't want to put if you go buy a coffee from the vendor, stick it in a nice cup, then you can have the cup out. I'm not going to come around and go, put your coffee cups away. Not that I do that particularly, but I think you should know that would mean that you wouldn't want to look. It's little details like that are really important. Now, most shows, regardless of where they are, don't give you storage for boxes or other stock during the show. It's an insurance nightmare and security issues, and it's not able to be done. So you have to manage that yourself on your stands. Again, think about your insurance. If you may not want to leave a lot of stock in your vans, because unless you've got goods in transit insurance, and to make sure it's definitely covered. But it's probably safer to leave everything on your stand, because at our shows, it's all fully fenced and security guarded throughout 24 hours. But just allow for that. So you need to make sure that everything is on your stand that you need. So in those cupboards, because Kirsty Elson's work is based on driftwood, so she's got like a driftwood work inspired dresser there. Inside there, I'd imagine there's lots of other stock, things like bubble wrap, or not bubble wrap these days, but the equivalent of that's not plastic, and other the bits and pieces that you don't want to see. So we've got a sandwich hiding there as well. But everything that you need, that you for running the show, you want it to everything to be nice and clear. And things like, she's got a little area there at the top there, that table, and there's some packing up work that's sold. And there's nothing wrong with you, because you want it nicely packaged and put into a nice bag. And what can be really nice is actually a simple way of branding your bags as well, is just get a nice big rubber stamp. Just buy plain nice bags and just rubber stamp them with a bag, because it looks quite nice and homemade as well. But you might want to say to someone, and there's nothing wrong with this, saying, well, I'm going to pack this out. You might want to go and have a coffee, and I'll have it ready for you when you get back. If it's a bit pressured, people are pretty easy going. If you say, oh, well, I'm just going to pack this, you can say to that. And also things like people saying, if you're going to do any deliveries afterwards or do anything afterwards, just be very clear about your timings. Don't say, oh, I'll definitely get that to you by Wednesday, because don't underestimate how quite time consuming and tiring this is. And you say, well, actually, I'll send, be clear about what your terms are. And especially if people are delivering, you might go, if it's a furniture maker, you go, well, after the show, I do free delivery within 30 miles or something where I am, especially if it's where you live. But don't ever promise things that you can't afford. For example, like, don't say, oh yes, I'll deliver that myself. Well, actually, you should say, well, when I get home, I'll get the price for the delivery, because a lot of people might commission you at the show that you might not find what they want. They'll go, well, actually, want that. So make sure, don't be pressured into naming your price on the day in terms of delivery and things like that. Say, well, I'll need to work that out when I get home. I'll email you the details about that. So don't always feel pushed into making a sale, about in that way. And again, when I talk about stand positions, your stand is really important to your how you are perceived. This stand, the work is fabulous, but there's just a bit too much on the stand. So if you look at the piece, the large goose at the bottom left there, and then to the right, there's a very tall, thin piece there. Those two are kind of blocking the stand. And also I feel a bit worried that I was going to knock over that plinth that's high up. And also when you have a corner stand like that, they're really valuable because they're really open. And you actually do, open stands are really great because you want people to come in, rather than just go past. So you don't want to block those situations. And also anything too high, anything sort of above head height or below below waist height, really, they're not really helping you out. It's more for filling the space, really. You've just got to think a less on the stand might be a bit more inviting as well in that regard. It depends, really. I mean, it's mostly just worry. I'd be a bit worried about knocking that over, but the work itself is absolutely superb. There's various things because part of the show, only doing the show is one part of it. Building up to doing the show is another one. And I'm not going to go into great detail. I mean, I'm not really going any further with that because that's a whole sort of marketing potential about how to prepare for the shows in that regard. But it is really important that you help your craft festival or craft fair organizer by telling your customers that you're going to be there too. Like, we will go do everything we can to get the public to our events, but it is your responsibility to get people to come to your stand. I'm like the tourist board in this in this regard. I'm like Devon Tourist. I get people to Bovey Trade. I get people to the craft festival gate. Get all these thousands of people. Now it's now over to you. So what have you done about it? So that's where your mailing list comes into place, and all your social media posts and everything, just to show people that you're going to be there as well. And it's great news as well for everyone to show, say, I'm part of this show. You know, it's a big deal. You know, you're part of Great Northern in Manchester or Mainland. It's a big deal. It's really brilliant, you know. So I use, these are all things that I use within my company to tell people about things. So I use MailChimp. Is there anyone here using MailChimp? Do you put like a 1 in the box if you are using MailChimp? 2 if you're not, just so I can get an idea. Yeah, so there's a few. 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay, lots of 2s. Okay, well, or different. Yeah, exactly. If you, MailChimp is the one I use. It's basically a way of sending out newsletters. So you don't have to use MailChimp, but if you're using a form of sending out newsletters, you can pop a 1 in, but I'm using MailChimp. MailChimp basically is a way of sending out simple newsletters, which tells people, which you can add nice pictures and some words and a link, really, which is the link is very important to tell people where you're going to be. And it's from our perspective, from the sales point of view, I get more real responses like ticket sales and you know, responses to, say, when we sold this workshop, we get more responses from our mailing list than, say, social media. Now, I know that's quite going to be different from people do. Some people sell extremely successfully on Instagram, so it does. I'm not saying it doesn't work, because it does. But I find that our newsletter is really important, and so you can sort of build up a real relationship as well with your customers. Because of where, you know, busy lives, everything, I use social schedulers for social media. I not really, apart from stories, most of it's done not in real time because of, you know, we post at 6 o'clock in the evening. We don't like to work morning, noon, and night, but that's what I do. You can use a layout app. The layout app, it's actually called Layout. If you wanted to do a montage of pictures, that can work. It's all on your phone. You can pick up images. It's so easy. I've used, and many of you use Canva. I would imagine a lot of you, if you put 1 in, if you've used Canva, 2 if you've not used Canva. Yeah, Canva is, and the free version of Canva is really comprehensive. If you've not used Canva before, what Canva is a design software. It's basically a website. You can upload your images. You can create promotional material, basically. So you can create, well, I've done everything from creating Instagram slides to presentations, to you can create your marketing materials. You could do business cards. You can make it yourself. Do it all yourself. And the free version is amazing. It's very comprehensive. So you can pay, but I've never really needed to use a paid version for and we do work with a designer as well, so don't get me wrong, I am pretty lucky in that regard, but I use Canva a lot. And then you can use Vista. I personally use Vista. There's lots of other companies available, because you can buy quite low numbers of certain things. You don't have to have thousands. You can buy a small number of business cards rather than getting thousands and thousands, because you can then update those then with new images. So obviously you must have, if you can, illustrated business cards, something you can pop in the bag so people then can remember you afterwards, because people will remember the work but they might forget your name. Is that we have it all the time. People email me and go, so, oh, I bought some earrings in 2019 with, you know, quite a vague description, and, you know, we can often work it out. But if you've popped a card in you know, you can create videos as well, because often like with Instagram, they've gone back on it now, but you can use the word videos all the time. So you can create videos using still pictures, and we use things like InShot, and Canva can do that as well. And if you want to create a brochure that you can email people, because you don't really want to produce a physical one because that's really quite expensive, you can use something called Issue. Magazines use it. I think there are various free versions of that. So you can use certain, you know, so because I don't think any of these, I mean, I do pay for Later. I think it's about £10. Later is a scheduling app. There's various, there's Planoly, and there is business suite with Facebook Meta, but gosh, it's very glitchy at the moment. It's really driving us around the twist, to be fair. So we're using Later at the moment, but there are different ones. Again, it's just a question of finding one that works, that feels right for you, and whether it suits your way you do things. Because it might be that you go, right, I can't stand social media. I'm going to do a post for the next couple of weeks, and I'm going to do it in this block of time. I'm going to do a few things and schedule it and then walk away. And then you don't have to think about it. So, but one of the main things I would to say about doing craft festivals or craft fairs is to enjoy yourself if you can, because you are amongst friends. You've all got the same dress on, the same necklace. I got this in wearing the same things over and over, but it is, you'll meet some amazing people, and it is a beautiful community of really like-minded, lovely people. And especially if you work in isolation, as I used to do. I used to come alive when I did the craft festival, craft fairs. I used to absolutely love it. And you get to make lifelong friends, and also lifelong customers as well. You know, it is a real thing. I'm not saying it's just all about the fun. That's not at all. But it is. You want it to be a nice experience, and we try to make it as nice an experience as possible. And I think there's a few people on here who've done craft festival before, and hopefully will attest that, you know, it is a nice experience to be involved in. So it is, there's a lot of work involved. I appreciate that. So what happens after? Okay, because you know, so you've applied, you've got your pictures ready, you've applied to the show, you've got into the show, you've promoted yourself to say that you're going to be at the show, you've done the show, and now after the show, there is a little bit of a process that you need to go through. So hopefully that you've created a little bit of a list of people that you've met and spoken to. So it's always good to email them and thank them about that, and on social media as well, to say, and it's a way of saying, I've been at this show. Did you know this is a really big deal? I'm worth buying from. So it's really good to show that, and if they have been, to show that you actually care about them, that you want to say thanks very much. I really appreciate it. We always send out evaluation forms. So it's usually a simple ticking process. Doesn't take too long, but it's so helpful that you do that. A lot of organizations will ask you to do that, and just take a few minutes so we can really assess then what's going on. And you can do it anonymously if you feel like you want to have a little rant and get some things off your chest. You don't have to tell us who you are, but it's always really helpful, and it helps you understand as well what it is that you enjoyed and what didn't enjoy, or you know, about the show. And often, just to bear in mind as well, a lot of sales will come after, and it can be quite a long game as well, depending on the value of your work. So another little thing you've got to consider then is that then some sales people will go directly to your website after the show, or even over the weekend of the show when they've left. So they make sure that they're either you're going to say, well, these products will be online, like don't wait, like maybe even have it ready and turned off, or what have you. I'm not sure if your website's got that sort of functionality ready to be turned on after the show, so people when sent, well, I really wanted to get that, but I didn't, and they'll go, because some people don't all make decisions quickly, and they might decide straight out. And that's just not me saying, oh, that's what happens. It happens all the time, and people will see a real uplift in, especially now that you've got the facility to have your own shop afterwards, is to do that, or make sure that people know that they can contact you. And in that email, you can say, to thank people, say, please let me know if there's anything you'd like, or, you know, get in touch if there's that commission that you're interested in, let's talk about it, blah, blah, blah. And if it's a very specific conversation, obviously, do an individual email to these people to make sure that you know that you've acknowledged the commission, and then you'll give some detail then about delivery times and things like that. yeah, I've had many people buy from me, even months. Yeah, I'm not surprised at all, Steve, because I think that is not unusual at all, and that's where the investment comes in with the show. When you think about, you think, because when you talk, and I talked about the budget a little bit earlier, there's quite an alarming list of amount of things that you need to think about. But ultimately, that is also part of your marketing budget. And think to yourself, well, if I do say 4 shows a year, and that might cost me 4 or 5,000, I know it might cost you 5,000-6,000 pounds, you know, depending on where you're going to do. You think that's the budget, that's my budget for marketing. And obviously you're going to sell work on the top of that. But that is something that you might have to, you think to yourself, well, I have to commit a certain percentage of my business to getting myself out there. And one of the quickest and easiest ways of getting yourself out there is actually being part of a big event, like a big craft fair. But also as well, you know, evaluate your own experience and your own thoughts about your stand as well. And you can, you know, obviously do it differently next time. You might think, oh, it's really good, but actually you'll go, I like what they did there. You know, that you'll always learn a lot from people around you. And you know, you might get to the people comment a lot. You might get comments that you don't want, you know, some people, you know, public can be a little bit insensitive, shall we say. So you just take those on the chin. Don't take things too personally when, you know, because you are dealing with the public and an uncontrollable beast that they are. So there's various, as I said before about research, there's lots of good shows. I'm not listing them all. I'm just going to list the ones that I'm a fan of. And there are lots more. So you can do your own research. But obviously, I love my shows are brilliant, so I'm going to say that. But the Great Northern in Manchester is fantastic as well. I think their applications, I think they may have just closed, actually. That's not great timing. I think they closed last night. But if you ask, you know, they might take a late application if you're thinking about it. Some people may have applied. It's a great event in Manchester. But if you're a potter, Potfest seem to be cleaning up around the country. So that's really worth looking at. And then in various venues in various parts of the country. They're not all over, but they are literally from Scotland down. So Leicester is a show in Nottingham area that's on in, I think, October time. It's sort of more sort of Christmas orientated. If you're a jeweler, Goldsmiths is the creme de la creme, which is a 2-week event with different makers on each week. During the show, how do you leave your stand securely if you're there on your own? Yeah, no, well, this is the point. This is where becoming friends with your fellow stand holders is very important. That's really, it's your cohort around you really are there to be your help, really. And it is tricky if you're on your own. There's no doubt about it. And that's why a lot of people do have an assistant with them, just for those purposes, really. But most don't, though, just to be clear. Some do, most don't. So it's really a question of, you know, you're usually surrounded by obviously one on each side, and maybe obviously everyone at the front if you're in a row there. So usually you've got at least 5 people within eye shot of your stand. So you know, I think it's always, you know, be as absolutely friendly. Don't chat to everyone. Make sure that you're happy to help them as well, you know, because they'll need to leave their stand as well. So I think that basically is how it works. So it's really just about all helping each other. So other shows, so got Made Brighton, Made London is coming back as well in November. That hadn't come back since COVID. So really pleased to hear that they're planning a show in London. And in Scotland, there's Glow, which is a mixed craft event, and then Cloth, which is textile only. And then of course there's Collect, which is on this weekend in London, which isn't really a show that you book a stand at. You're generally invited to do that, to be part of a gallery, but it's worth going at to look at them, you know, some beautiful work, because it's an international show. And again, you can sort of look and see how stands are set up and just get that sort of experience of being at a show of that caliber is always exciting. When you're working in isolation, it sometimes can be really helpful if you join organisations as well. We run Find a Maker, which is a directory and business tool, which you can join. Applications open. You can register your interest now. Applications open on the 10th of March. Design Nation is another amazing national organisation that is quite similar to Find a Maker. It's been going a lot longer. It's got amazing makers, and they do all sorts of different things as well. It's worth looking into. And for business advice, and your great sort of support as well with in-depth business workshops. You can't really beat the Design Trust. So they're worth looking at as well. Okay, that is me for now. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to go look at some of the questions you've got there. And if you do want to ask me questions, come off mute if you wish, because I'm doing this solo, so I'm reading all the questions for me. I presume that photos you can hammer nails and walls. I'll put pictures up. Yeah, you can. You just don't want great big screws. You just got to be able to fill them in at the end, basically. So you need to return it how you've been given it, if you know what I mean. So you can do, yeah, but you can't drill in massive, you know, big roll plugs or anything like that. I wouldn't go crazy. For low value stock, how much stock would everyone suggest to take to an event? Right. Well, you've got to basically look at how much it's cost you, the show. How much does the show cost you? And you've got to take about twice as much as it's cost you, really, to be able to break, to think about breaking even, really. So you have to have a lot of stock, depending on how much the show has cost you. So if the show's cost you £500, you need to take about £1,000 of the stock at least. As a low point, I think, really. So you need to take quite a lot, but it could be the stand is £100, so you need to take £200 worth of stock, something like that. What does anyone else think about that? Happy to take advice on that. How well do hand-dyed textiles and clothing usually sell in general? Well, if there's anyone on here that can answer that properly, then I'll say that clothing is one of the growth areas, I think, in handmade at the moment. There's still not huge. There's lots of people obviously doing fashion accessories, but in terms of actual clothes, there's still, it's still one of those. So I think it's one of the holy grails of the craft market, really, about when people will start actually wearing all handmade clothes. But I think it's definitely a growing market. Is that what you make then, Jennifer? Where are you? You're there somewhere. On the next page, possibly.
Oh, hi, thank you. Yes, I specialize in hand-dyed traditional shibori techniques.
Yes.
Yes, but I don't use natural dyes, but the fiber reactive dyes, but I'm trying to create tops, contemporary tops.
Yeah. No, I think that some of the people that make, we have lots of hand knitters, lots of clothing. There was an example of someone earlier. I showed this stand of a maker selling clothing. She does dresses and knitwear, really, and she does phenomenally well. So I can't be, you can only say so much about how successful you can be, but it certainly is a market. There is a market there for that kind of work, for sure. I think so, definitely, and I think it's the one that is growing a lot more. What's the range of prices? What is the range of prices of the works? In craft fair, in the craft festival, I do, and generally it's every price range, anything from £10 to £10,000. It depends on what it is. It could, because we have all sorts of different makers. There's potters selling mugs for £30–40 maybe, to jewelers selling platinum diamond rings. It's wide range. That's quite top end. I'd say there's a lot of makers within the sort of £100 to £200 to £300 price point mark. It's not, it's wide ranging. You have wide ranging people, so it depends on what you do. It's all different, really. So it all depends on the work. What's the questions here? Sorry. You sell out. What do you think about not selling last piece and keeping it as display? It says made to order. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think sometimes it's nice to have a big piece, biggish, some big pieces as well that are maybe more, not, you don't want an empty stand, but it's a good problem to have. If you're going to do that, you can do that. I don't think that's a problem. Wood refashion garment, yeah, absolutely. Anything. We work with any materials, recycled. I've got Steve Simmons there. You've got your hand up. You wanted to ask a question. Ask a question. Sorry, love.
Sorry, I'm not Steve as well. Sorry, I'm Phil.
That's what I
I'm on
said.
my husband's island. I just have I'm going to be at Bovey in June in the startup tent.
Yeah.
And I'm selling lampshades, so I'm a lampshade maker. But I'm sort of trying to work out how many I need to bring, how to store them even. I mean, we're staying quite close by, but I don't want to do too much stock because then I've got to store it if it doesn't sell, and etc. It's a really difficult. Lampshades are big, aren't they? And they're
Yeah,
also
no, it is a bit of a difficult one, especially when you're starting out. You're not, not quite sure of the market. It's a difficult. I can't really answer that for you, unfortunately, very well. But I would sort of maybe bring more stock than you think you need,
okay.
and just bring in as each day. If you need to change. If you're staying in, are you staying in accommodation?
Yeah, we're staying in an Airbnb. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you've got that ability to keep some of the stock in your accommodation. And then, because you can bring in things every day, you can arrive early and or stay late.
Yeah.
Depending what you prefer, and rejig your, restock that way, or come in early with stock and do it that way.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That's all right. Was it how even for the first stall? I'm not quite sure what that. I imagine you say that one question again. If you sell out, there we are. What is your range of prices? Oh, so yeah, it's all sorts of prices. Is how does the stand look before you do anything to it? Well, it depends which show you're doing. We had to go have grey stands for a bit for various reasons, because there was some availability issues after COVID. But we generally use a white plywood. Well, some of the, let me see. I'll just bring up my presentation again briefly. I'll see if I can find, yeah. No, that's not showing up, is it? No, I don't think that's showing. I'm not doing it properly. Hang on. Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to show you that for a second. Sorry, I'll just find some examples of the stands that we showed you. So that's a bit like it's whiteboards. They're 1.5 meters deep. I think that's a little bit deeper. That was an earlier style. So that this looks like that's white, just white boxes, basically. Does that answer your question? Oh, Anne's off it. See you at Cheltenham. Yeah, we're doing a show at Cheltenham in a couple of weeks' time again. So if you are wondering about what our shows look like, if you're thinking of doing Craft Festival, that's a good opportunity, because we've got a show in Cheltenham. Visible prices. Yes, we asked that earlier, didn't we? Oh, sorry, just trying to look through all these questions. Yeah, is there any questions that I've missed? If anyone has asked a question, can you maybe speak it? Thank you for time lost connection and you manage. Oh, missed connection. No. What if you have a table for a friend? Yeah, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And especially every style is fine. You just got to think about positioning of things on your stand. Make it really easy for the customer to because some people stand behind it like a counter, and then some people have put tables in their stand so you can go into the stand. I think it's quite good that you maybe invite people in, especially because people just walking past. So make some space so people get into your stand, so you could have the table set back a bit maybe, but that is fine. I mean, a lot of jewelers use a countertop very successfully, but I would use that space to encourage people to go in, but you can just use tables absolutely fine. Yeah, I'm just worrying about if you've missed any of this from the beginning. If you didn't join the beginning and any problems joining, it is being recorded, and I will be turning it into a video and everyone who's booked on will be getting a copy of it. It takes a few days to do that, unfortunately. It doesn't bang, you know, immediately appear. I have to, it's quite a while to download and to sort out and make it look a bit prettier. So probably within, well, by next week at latest, you'll get a copy of this so you can listen back to it again. So when questions? Any more questions?
Can I ask a quick question, please?
Yes, of course.
Sorry, just what kind of footfall does the fair have, or do they have different footfalls at Cheltenham and Bovey?
Oh yeah, Bovey has something. Is up to well, between 8,000 and 10,000 people come to the show in Devon, and to Cheltenham it's more between 2,000 and 3,000, depending on the one in March. That's coming up. We have about 2,000-ish, something like that. It's a much smaller venue. The one in Bovey is a massive park. It's more like a festival, really, like a mini. There is music. It's not a music festival, but do you know what I mean? There's music and food and the whole thing, and it's been going for 20 years. Whereas Cheltenham's been going 3 or 4, well, 3 years really, because of COVID. And that's building up. But I think I'm not sure what the numbers are for Manchester. I want to say at least 5,000. It's a good event there as well. They do vary. Most of the websites might say their footfall as well, but interestingly, footfall is not necessarily a good guide. Sometimes it can be who's come through the door, not necessarily loads and loads of people, because you can have some shows they're absolutely heaving with people and they're just walking past just for looking. I mean, I don't know if people can have that experience, but it's really about making sure you know, you've really like targeted the audience really for that, and that's my job really. But at the same time, you know, you inviting your customers is really important, you know, for you as well, you know, not just for getting people through the door so I got the tickets there. That's not the point. It's about making sure that your customers are coming to meet you there. How do you apply for workshops and talks? Well, you can email me about whether you can do workshops. I pass them on to someone else. I have a coordinator for workshops. It's too late now for Bovey, that's all done, but we're always interested, especially if you live locally to the venues as well. That's always helpful. Any other questions? Any thoughts? Yeah, that's interesting, Gemma. And I think that you know, it depends what they're there for, you see, because it's a game fair. You know, you're not necessarily there for buying craft, are you? So it's a different kind of the audience is maybe not matched up. So you have thousands of people, but they're not there to buy that kind of stuff. So you can do some of it, but I wouldn't discount. I mean, it's always worth talking to people at shows like county shows and different places that have craft elements to it. But just to make sure that they're not, you can fall foul of it really. No pun intended with the game show there, but you can sort of be at these very, very high number shows, but people aren't there for your stuff, you know, for your kind of things. Whereas, you know, if you have a particular craft event, like obviously people there, that's the main focus. Yeah, okay, I'm just checking. I have to go, just checking I haven't missed any questions. Yeah, have to go, yeah. Great, I'm glad you enjoyed. I hope it was useful for you today. It's really enjoyed talking to you. If you've got any questions, could you organise another Art in Action? I already do organise an Art in Action. It's called Craft Festival Bovey Tracy, and it's down in Devon. So I would suggest that maybe you come down there, and yeah, it's very much modelled on Art in Action, just on a smaller scale and a much more affordable scale as well. So if you, it'd be great if you wanted to come along to the next sessions. We've got one on Louisa Chudley. She is an Instagram expert talking about how to be more discoverable on Instagram. You know, Instagram is ever-changing beast that always keeps us guessing, but it really is one of these necessary evils. You can love it or loathe it, but it's there. I will really look forward if you can come to Cheltenham, which is on next weekend, and then so we've got Louisa Chudley's workshop, and then after that, PR Dispatch, Rosie Davis. I don't know if you know her. She's got a great company that helps, very aligned with small businesses and makers to help them get pressed. It will give you the sort of tools to how to get your own press as well, which is, you know, another mystery. But she really kind of sort of demystifies the whole process, which I think is really helpful. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure. If you have any questions, you can email me at hello@craftfestival.co.uk. And please follow me on Instagram at Craft Festival. It'd be great to meet you sometime. And if you do come to any of the shows, make sure you come and give me a poke and say, hey, I saw you, I met you at a talk, and I always love meeting new people and new makers and just having a good old natter about craft and all that jazz. Anyway, it's great to meet you all, and all the best and take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.